Welcome, everyone. I'm a little bit late. Apologies for that. I'm going to introduce my course on Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics now. Where's my book? Here it is. So, whether you're seeing this live right now or listening to it later on, I'd like to introduce the course, but really, I want to give a lecture on Eudaimonia, on the good life. And, well, in broad strokes, perhaps, but still, I think even if you don't enroll, this will be a lecture that you can listen to later on and also learn perhaps a few things on what it is that Aristotle means by eudaimonia and the good life, etc. So let me just have a start off by saying that this is the final course for the year. It's also going to be one of, at least for some time, until the next year later on or so, the last long seminar course that I am going to offer. So if you'd like to, if you've never done a course at my academy and you'd like to perhaps be in a seminar room with me, then it might be a good idea to enroll now. I might only be offering a course again sometime later next year that will be with seminars. So what we do is we offer courses throughout the year, and this one is in total 10 weeks long. So there are 10 seminars which begin on the 12th of October, which is a Saturday, 6 p.m. UK time, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are going to, so you can see if you click on the link in the description of this video, you find an overview of what we're going to do. And in the first week, I'm going to lecture for about 45 minutes or so, just on some fundamental Aristotelian concepts, such as arete, scholae, nous, phronesis, ethos, dynamis, energeia, and the so-called four causes. So this will be the first week. If you don't know any ancient Greek, that's perfectly fine. You'll come out of this lecture being able to understand some of the most fundamental Aristotelian Greek terms, and would also try and give new translations where it makes sense. And then there are lectures for each. Maybe I'll just show you that right now. There are lectures for each week, and they look like this on the inside. So let's see here. The good. Can I just open this now? Yes. So I'll turn off the volume. I recorded the lectures in Athens. Some of them here with a view of the Acropolis, and some in, for example, this one here in the ancient Agora of Athens. This is the one on friendship, etc. So if you're interested in taking the seminars, then please do join the seminar tier. I'll discuss what that means a bit later on. And however, if you don't have time for the seminars and you'd like to read Aristotle with, by the help of some guidance from my lectures, then you could enroll in the self-study tier. The first tier, you get indefinite access to all lectures. So the videos I recorded in Athens last year, they've been uploaded, but I'm going to lecture, I think, at least in another 5 or 6, maybe even more, of the seminar. So there will be additional lectures uploaded throughout. So I think in total it'll be around somewhere between 12 to 15 video lectures. In the lectures, I try to give a sort of perhaps a bit of a different reading of Aristotle, but in the lectures that I will give through during the seminars, the live lectures, and also the discussions will be, I guess, a bit more classical or traditional. And I'm also going to present a very classical or traditional, ordinary, I would say, almost reading of Aristotle and the Nicomachean ethics now when it comes to the question of Eudaimonia, and the good life. Now, I'm going to start lecture. Now, if you have any questions, let me know in the chat, please, so I can get to them at the end. I think I'll be here for about 45 minutes or so. And if you have questions specifically on the course, that would be great. Then I can uh, perhaps, let you know um, right now. And yes, I hope to see as many of you as possible um, at the course. It is really a fundamental book, a fundamental text, I should say, not book. Um, it's a fundamental text for the study of ethics, but also if you're interested more broadly in Greek philosophy and, of course, ethical theory, you should have read the Nicomachean Ethics at least once. Maybe I should start off by saying that Aristotle himself, it seems here, at least in the beginning, is responding to Plato. So I started this year, by the way, in January with a 11-week long course on Plato's Politeia, on the Republic, on what the public good, the common good is and how it can be organized, etc. What Aristotle criticizes about Plato, to simplify it a bit, is that the idea of the good as um, a metaphysical idea is ultimately turned away from practical life. And hence Aristotle is looking for an ethics that concerns itself with practical life and how we form our character through habits, etc. So eudaimonia we should not understand as an end state. I'm going off my notes now. It's not an end state that we can reach. So even though Aristotle, to keep it a bit simple, is a teleological thinker, we could say, and does speak of a telos teleoitaton, a highest telos, we should not think of eudaimonia or the good life or happiness as an end state that can be reached and that is reached by some and not by others, for example. And Aristotle, as often is the case, and by the way, Heidegger follows him in this regard, looks at or considers how ordinarily people would think of the good life, what it is that they say about the good life, also what is it that language or certain idioms tell us about the good life. For example, money and hedonism, or a life for the sake of pleasure, those are both ruled out immediately. They don't lead us at all to proper eudaimonia. Money is just a means, and eudaimonia should not be a means for anything. Enjoyment or pleasure, or hedonism on its own, again, is not specifically human, Aristotle would point out. So animals can feel pleasure or maybe do things for the sake of pleasure. And so do human beings, of course, as well. But the question for Aristotle is, and this is perhaps, I think, especially crucial now, um, uh, so I think, with Aristotle we can actually give a response to those who would already throw the human being out as now we have so-called AI, um, especially if we do understand what Aristotle actually means by rationality or reason or logos. So the specific question that Aristotle asks is, what is it that makes the human being human? What is specifically human? And he goes about this by saying that there are two different forms of life that, aside from the life that pursues, for example, the earning and making money, earning and making money is fine, but it must not become an end. Money is always ever a means. Now, of course, in our time, money is more than just a means, it seems, but that's a different story. So he leaves, and hedonism is not a life that's good enough either. Hence, the theoretical life and political life are still possible. Let's say are still open to those could lead to eudaimonia. As we shall see, it's only the political life that he ultimately allows for, leading to eudaimonia. And I have to be careful how I phrase this. When I say leading to eudaimonia, I don't mean as an end state, but really as how in the enactment of a certain virtuous rationality, eudaimonia comes about. And for anyone joining now, please do let me know if you have a question on Aristotle or on the course more specifically, then please just put the question in the chat and I'll get back to you. If you want to enroll, the link to do so is in the description of this video. The seminars start in exactly 2 weeks. So here is the link to enroll. Just 1 second, please. Here's the link to enroll. I hope that you can join us if you have the time. We begin mid-October and we finish mid-December. At the final seminar, you get to present your own talk or essay or poem or whatever it is that you were inspired to write or create during the course. Now, we need to introduce a distinction that Aristotle makes quite early on in the book, which is the distinction between, I'll just say, action and production. What does it mean to act, really? What is good action? Now, Aristotle is very strict here, as one should be. In his theory of action, maybe I can summarize it as follows. A production or a product, to produce means to have that something has its end outside itself. For example, making a table. Action, however, has its end within itself, in its enactment. The path is the goal, as it were. Hence, eudaimonia is not an end state, or else it would be something produced. It would be a product. So, just straight away, because Seraphim asks, eudaimonia, according to Aristotle, is better conceived as a state or mode of being, a process, activity. So, not at all one. Yeah, not at all a state. Depends what you mean by mode of being. And I would say that for now, we get to this in the end. It has to do with an activity, yes. But I think it'll be clearer in the end. So, but it's not at all ever a state. And by the way, maybe I should point this out. So I can say for now that it's in acting or in the enactment itself that this end must come about. So it's in acting or in enacting that the end of eudaimonia comes about, but only ever in that enactment. But it cannot. Okay, I'll leave it at that for now. But maybe I can say that Heidegger's Heidegger's notion, or Heidegger's notion of, I wouldn't want to say theory, but Heidegger's notion of authenticity in being and time is quite similar to this here, insofar as authenticity is not an end state that Dasein can reach by facing up to death or running forth towards death in a very authentic way, etc., but is only ever in the enactment of. And given also the factical possibilities that Dasein is confronted with. Now, what you could ask yourself, whether you join the cause or not, is, do you act in the Aristotelian sense, or do you produce? So It's a question, for example, when we what is it that we do when we um, I don't know, work out? Do we produce? Do we work out for the sake of working out, for the fun of it, or um, well, you're not enacting Dasein. You have to be careful because if you say enacting Dasein, yeah, then your Dasein is in a sense uh, seemingly almost a metaphysical um, thing that then is being enacted. Dasein is itself enactment. Dasein is chaos. That means to say Dasein is always already ahead of itself, and it's quite similar, really, in Aristotle. But what it really has to do with is virtue, and we'll get to this in the end. So ask yourself: do you act or do you produce? I could be a bit self-critical. What is it that I'm doing right now? Am I acting or am I producing? So it's important to note that. But great question, Seraphim. I hope you join us. Because yeah, it's such minute details that it's often quite difficult to keep track of what it is that Aristotle is doing. But I think it's incredibly rich, and it helps us to think this through, to try and think through and articulate for oneself what it actually means in an Aristotelian sense to act, with the end is within the enacting. Um, is so different from how we usually think, because I think we're all ultimately quasi-utilitarians. And for Aristotle, for example, utilitarianism is not an ethics, because utilitarianism is about producing. It's about producing the outcome of the greatest happiness for all by purely materialistic means, for example. So utilitarianism would not be considered an ethics to an Aristotelian or to Aristotle himself. Um, Maybe that is why Marx used Bentham as a swear word in his notebooks. I don't know. But also, when it comes to communism, you see, communism itself proposes a historical end state, and that it can proclaim with absolute certainty. And that, of course, is also anti Aristotelian, ultimately, to have such a rigid teleology. So, again, also maybe if there's some Platonists listening, we're not here pursuing several different ends or teloi until such time that we reach a highest telos, full communism, or the idea of the good, which cannot be reached, by the way. And so the instead, what we have to rather consider is enactment again, this actualization of the highest, but always in enacting or enacting itself, and thus in practical life. Eudaimonia is not an effect or a consequence of action, because that would place it outside action. Action has its end in its being enacted. Hence, also the highest telos, again, the telos teleoteton, must hence be actualized in enactment only. But if that were what we are looking at, then we are, this is perhaps it could almost sound as though we have to enact certain rules or a certain duty, etc. But that is not the case. What Aristotle is after is the character that is, in a sense, doing the acting. So, what about virtue? Now, I'm not too content actually with considering this only a work of, say, virtue ethics, even though I see the appeal. The Greek word for virtue is arete, and arete was one of those words that we were not allowed to translate. So one of the things that I try and do um, in the basically the little book I wrote for this lecture series is to try and give a new or a way of translating arete into English, not in a single word, but in maybe a sentence or so, and that opens something up. But more on this during the course. So what Aristotle is after is of course virtue, and is character, is the makeup of someone's character, how to form character by habit, and how to etch one's character, etc. Now, to live as a human being, to become human is a task, is a mandate. It's not just a simple fact. Means to live, and to live a rational way, to live according to logos. Soon logon echon is the slogan, is the definition of the human being, we should say more appropriately when it comes to Aristotle, is the Aristotelian definition of the human being, sine qua non. We are zoon politikon, yes, we are political beings, but we are fundamentally zoon logon echon. The living being that holds itself echon in logos. And what's crucial, though, is that we need to make a connection between echein, the verb echein, to have, to hold oneself, which, by the way, echein can also mean to be, not just to have. It's very striking. Is that word is related to scolaire, and scolaire means, well, doesn't mean, but it's translated as leisure. We don't really have a word for it. And so let's just use the traditional translation of scolaire as leisure. So we could say perhaps that to be in logos, to hold oneself in logos, to be properly rational, also means to be in leisure, in leisure. Now, again, though, not as a state, but that's what we will discuss at the last lecture. So that's in 3 months from now, if you do join us. Let me just point this out. Now, if you click on the link, which is in the description of this video and also in the chat, it takes you to this website here, which is Teachable, and you find all enrollment details here. Also an overview over the course here, week 1 to week 10. In week 10, we have the student symposiums. You may present your own work here. All lecture and seminar dates are listed here, and this would be your study tier philosophical fellowship live seminar discussions, 10 weeks of seminars. I do hope that you can make it. You're all most cordially invited. I'll say a bit more on all of this later on. If you do have more questions, let me know. I'll just get to this one here by Indiana. I'm wondering if you will be presenting any commentary on some of Aquinian's reliance on his work. Well, if this were a course on Aquinas, then yes, but this is not a course on Aquinas, this is a course on Aristotle. However, if you have read Aquinas and you think it helpful and useful to mention Aquinas during the seminars, then please do so. I've read a bit of Aquinas, and I might be using Aquinas when it comes to De Ente et Essentia, for example, because this is very helpful, I think, to understand what Aristotle means by a definition and what Aristotelian metaphysics are, which might be a digression that we might be going down. So let me return here to my notes. Where was I? So to be human, there's a task, let's say, to fulfill or enact reason. Now, I'll say with some caution that is highest eudaimonia. And I'll explain this a bit further in a second. When we are virtuous, or rather when we are in virtuous reason, or when our reason is virtuous, then we fulfill our eudaimonia. So this is now coming back to what Seraphim pointed out. I'll just go back to, if you have questions, by the way, let me know. So here's Seraphim. So eudaimonia, according to Aristotle, is better conceived as a state, a mode of being, a process or activity. And perhaps what I'm about to say will answer this. It's certainly not one. A mode of being, insofar as if mode is so being for Aristotle is itself active. There's an activity of being. But perhaps this is getting clearer now. When we are, I'll say this again, when we are virtuous, or rather when our reason is virtuous, then we fulfill our eudaimonia, virtuous rationality in everyday life based on our habits and character. So this is the political life, we could say. The ergon of the human being, the work of the human being, or maybe even the essence of the human being, if you want to use that translation, is the enactment of reason. This is what we have to, this is the work we have to do. And the work is, we could say, also the essence. So the activity of what it means to be human is to enact reason. It's not just a given fact, it's not just a state in which we're simply rational beings. It is in the enactment of reason. And of course, this opens a huge can of worms between theoretical reason and practical reason, etc., which is actually opened. That Pandora's box is opened by Aristotle himself in this very book, which is also something we might be discussing. Which I think, however, can be not solved for, but can be addressed in a new way, as I try and do in the lectures, if we do consider in an appropriate manner the phenomenon of scolaire, but that's for another time to discuss. That's something we'll discuss also at the course. And by the way, of course, we will also go through the different virtues such as courage. And it is ultimately also a guide to the good life, but the good life is a, um, well, we have to be careful with what pure being. That's just that's ultimately so. Is it not more precise to call being as acting, existing, I standing out from pure being? Well, yeah, 2,500 years later. Yeah, that's Heidegger. But we're not there yet. And the purity of being is not ultimately something, it's a good question, but the purity of being is not uh, you see, we have to be careful when we read these texts, because we have this tendency after having 2,500 years of a body of texts and tradition, is that we attack these texts uh, with with notions and concepts that aren't yet even in question. Yeah, what Aristotle is trying to do first and foremost is to ground ethics in practical life after what he sees as uh, uh, an incapacity, an impasse in Plato's Republic to actualize the good. Yeah, so you could almost say that the pure being is the idea of the good, if you like, and it's turned away ultimately from human life. So what we will address in the course is what the specific virtues are that are in fact leading us to ethic, or that play a part in ethical action. So um, so if that is so those virtues we will discuss at the course. And so let me just say this now. It is virtue that defines what is ethical, and not, however, now to rephrase a little bit what I said in the beginning or throughout the presentation now, is not just the enactment themselves. So it is ultimately virtue or arete that stands highest and that defines ultimately what is ethical. So we need to be able to understand what it is that ultimately Aristotle means by arete, and because this is what the defining power of what is ethical. Again, Aristotle is not after fulfilling duties or rules, and it's not about the consequences of actions either. The condition, let's say, of soul or character is what is crucial. And now I'll just mention a few more words on book 10, which is an incredible part of the entire book, rather unsuspected that all of a sudden Aristotle would say that the theoretical life or philosophical life, which is pure contemplation, is even outside action. And it's in this life, though, that he sees the highest in the life of nous, ultimately, the highest achievement of what, when it comes to eudaimonia. But he wants it. It seems to have it both. He wants to have it both ways. It seems, but that's something that we will also be discussing at the course. So, if you allow me, if you have any questions, here's Thomas Chokin. Thank you very much, Thomas. An Aristotelian by trade. Thomas Chokin just taught a course on Plato, on beauty. So glad you're having this course on Aristotle. Well, thank you. And I do hope that many of you may and will join us. I'm just looking at an email, but this is from someone who is in the course, so they will have enough time to raise their questions actually at the course. So now I would like to invite you once more and maybe go over some of the details when it comes to enrollment, etc. If you have any more questions, please do let me know. So, seminars start in exactly 2 weeks on Saturday, the 12th of October 2024. We will meet 10 times. We always meet for about 2 hours, 6 to 8 p.m. UK time, 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it should be possible for most Americans to join us, or those of you who are in the Americas as well. If you click on the link to enroll, which is this one here, which is in the description of this video if you're watching this later on, I'm not sure that the chat will actually be available afterwards. You find here a course overview, week 1. I'll say this again now. I will lecture live, and of course the lecture will be recorded and also made available to anyone who's either in the seminar tier or also in the self-study tier. So you will get access to any additional video lectures that I will record. I want to begin this course. You may, of course, read Aristotle already, but we will just look at some fundamental Aristotelian ancient Greek terms. I will present what Aristotle means by them. I will present traditional translations, and I will also try with some of them to give different translations, or maybe even not just translations, but as it were, entire rather thoughts or entire sentences, let's just say sentences, that might describe what is at stake with a certain word, so that we have a foundation when it comes to Aristotle and the way in which he uses certain words and how he understands certain words. If then you look further, you see that in week 2, we will discuss the question of the good, as opposed, for example, to Plato's idea of the good. We'll then move on to virtue, arete, character, and the mean, the golden mean. We will also discuss, of course, proairesis in Aristotle, which is crucial to understand what he means by making a good choice. Um, we could also translate this as character, etc. But obviously, a choice that you make in the realm of morality forms your character. Hence, Priorus is how to make a good choice. In week 5, we look at what is justice for Aristotle, which is book 5. We might be having, if there is an interest, an additional lecture on book 4 and discussion as well. So that's perfectly fine. We can do that in week 5 as well. We'll, of course, also look at phronesis, because here, when it comes to phronesis, Aristotle tries to combine the practical with the theoretical. Phronesis is prudence usually, or practical wisdom, as you probably already know. So here we're already working our way towards book 10, the climax of the book. Of course, we also have to look at, we will look at the different virtues in discussion, and there's also mention of them in the lectures. But we must, of course, also consider what happens when we actually lack, let's say, self-control. Akrasia is the word for that. The lecture in week 8 will be on friendship. Aristotle distinguishes, for example, between friendships of utility, we could say, or friendships of pleasure. And he presents philosophical friendship as the highest form of friendship. And I think that has, however, also a specific political dimension to it, I should point out. And then, of course, in week 9, the final lecture will be on leisure or scolaire and the good life. And thank you very much for listening, Wendy. Looking forward to this course. Thank you very much, Wendy. Wendy has already enrolled, was one of the first to enroll. So you can see here a list of questions that we will consider. Of course, this is not exhaustive, so there will be more questions that we address and questions that come up during the seminars. So the seminars are, while I will lecture in the beginning of some of them, they are very open. I want to see where does the reading of Aristotle take you. I'd like to be able to um, share with you a sort of a classical reading of the Nicomachean ethics, and maybe also one that's a bit more experimental or unusual that I present in the lectures that are already on the on Teachable now. And during the seminars, though, you can raise your questions and work on the text. We can look at the Greek, and we'll try and make sense of some sentences that, because to be honest, there will be sentences in there that are untranslatable, and some sentences will be poorly translated by some translations, or certainly also by me. Um, so it's very much discussion based. Come with an open heart and open mind, genuinely, and see where it leads you. The leitmotif, as always, is that we learn only in order to create. So you don't come to regurgitate or to be able to list all the virtues, etc., that Aristotle uh, gives, but instead to be able to think. And if you to learn how to think, because then you're already in the enactment of what it means to be a human. And with Aristotle, if that is also done virtuously, then you are fulfilling the highest eudaimonia. So I just wanted to make sure I can still mark it. Yes. So here are all the seminar days if you want to join the seminar. So let me now just go over this here. You can see me here sitting just with the Acropolis behind me. So that's where the lectures were recorded last year. And now I can finally teach this course. I'm very much looking forward to it. If you'd like to take this course for self-study and learn at your own pace, then now is the time to enroll in the self-study tier. There will be more than 8 exclusive video lectures in the end, because I'm going to record more lectures in the beginning of the seminar. So in the end, it should be about 12 or maybe even 15 in total. That is well, time will show how many there will be in the end. There will also be printable PDFs of all lecture notes. They have not yet been uploaded. They will be uploaded sometime in a week or 2 weeks from now. But if you have time for live seminars, if you can make at least 5, then you should really join the Philosophical Fellowship. 10 weeks of seminars. We begin on the 12th of October, which is a Saturday. We meet for 10 weeks in a row. And at the final seminar, the symposium, you get to present your own work. And this need not be at all anything academic whatsoever. This could be a short story, or an essay, or a song, or a poem, or a painting. So, whatever inspired you during this course, or maybe a collection of aphorisms that you wrote during the time of the course that we spent together. Course, it is a course. It's a cursus. It's leading us somewhere, and that is all very welcome. Of course, if you do want to write something more traditional, a talk, a lecture, etc., that's perfectly fine as well. Depending on how many people we are, you have somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes for your final talk. If you want to take additional private tutorials with me, then please do sign up for the 5 private tutorials, which is in addition to 10 weeks of seminars. Every enrollment, can I just say, helps continue the work. I try and put out new lectures and philosophical thoughts on this channel almost weekly. Or, for example, I meet with Stephen Holgate to interview him, or I was just at Ken Cheams's house. That will be published in a month or so on this channel as well. And that, of course, is only possible, and maybe also the broader project, of course, is to build ultimately at some point a physical location for Halcyon Academy, where we can teach and provide a foundation for Bildung, for higher formation, in a way that is not possible inside academia, because academia, and especially the university, has been reduced to nursery for young adults and degree mills, where the future elite are groomed until that golem gets away from them. So I have to say, there's not much left inside academia. I'm still shedding what I was made to do, and when you have to write in a certain way, and that doesn't really lead to genuine creativity in our time, especially in the information age, where you can just find any information that you want online immediately, and the one who's best at prompting and regurgitating will win out in this game. That is not what it means to think. So ultimately, the teleoitaton of Halcyon, is to actualize itself physically somewhere in the Mediterranean. And that is what every enrollment supports as well. We do want to keep the spirit of Europe alive. And perhaps it's a good sign that the European Union is introducing regulation against AI. Might just be that Europe will be the last homeland of human beings at some point. So, if you can join us, I hope that you will join the seminars or maybe even take private tutorials with me. In addition, I would be delighted to meet you and discuss your project with you if you um, have pressing questions on Aristotle and ethics, etc. This is what, and I think there are only now two available at this point. Or if you'd like, there's also a payment plan. I apologize for the for that language, for that terminology, but I haven't come up with anything better, and this is so self-explanatory that it makes most sense. If you'd like to pay in 3 installments, this is for the philosophical fellowship, which is that's the live seminars. So you can also just use this here. You'll find some of our students, etc., here frequently ask questions. All of this apparently is your teacher. Apparently has a doctorate of sorts. Um, so take a look at the enrollment page, please. And my good friend Adam Todd, by the way, took that picture. If you are in London and you ever need a good headshot, then do reach out to Adam. He is magnificent. Also, ask yourself, why is it that Aristotle holds his hand down, points downwards in the fresco, the school, in Raffaello's fresco, the School of Athens? It is ultimately Aristotle who brought philosophy down to the people. It is not so much perhaps Socrates. And arguably, what the tradition did not pick up on, the European tradition, is that Aristotle continues and completes the Platonic project. And that actually the Platonic forms, so called, are really fully actualized in Aristotle's thought. If you read Plato's Parmenides dialogue, Plato is almost already where Aristotle will go. This is perhaps also something that we might want to discuss. If you, like Wendy, took the Plato course earlier this year with me, then perhaps this is where you'd like to go in the end, in our discussion after we've done some groundwork. But of course, also, if you are really interested in totally practical concerns, what does it mean to lead a good life? How can I lead a good life? What is it? What kind of guidance does Aristotle give us for that? I think there's a lot in there, and this is also something that will come up in the course, of course, as well. So if you just consider that Aristotle likely wrote this book for his son, Nicomachus. uh, it's not entirely certain why the book is called Nicomachean Ethics. His father was called Nicomachus, I think, as well. So, but let's just assume that it's dedicated to both, to his father and to his son. He is telling his son, he's guiding him along how to edge his character to become virtuous, so that everything conjoins together well, which means that eudaimonia is reached then in the enactment insofar as it stands under virtue. If you're interested in how to form good habits, this is something that we discussed also at the intellectual life course and seminar a few weeks ago. Um, there's nothing more important in our time than good, healthy habits that help you attain your goal, that help you attain what it is that you're striving for, or else in this time of extreme abstraction and abstraction, yes, abstraction, and I wanted to say uh, distraction. Um, there's nothing more important than habits. So I think what I will do with the seminars, especially, is those of you who are purely interested in the theoretical aspect and side, we will be focusing on this a lot. But if you come with practical questions or issues or concerns, how to form habits, how to shape your character, etc., that is very much also how to make a good choice, how to avoid akrasia, right? How to enact meaningful, useful, good self-control. When does maybe even self-control become excessive and take over too much, etc., and hence is maybe to your detriment, etc. So this is something that we'll try and understand, because this is not schools. I won't be marking your essays. I will take you seriously. So that's to say, if I think that you cannot argue your point, I will make you aware of this, and during the discussion, for example, and also will point you to, well, we'll um, ask you to reconsider and think something through again, and so of course you will do with me, um, and to perhaps say something in a clearer way, or reconsider something, etc. And then we all learn, but we don't learn because you get a degree in the end, or because you get a mark in the end, which is, what is it? To come back to how we started this, that would be a product. You see, the trouble with the degree is the word itself is so pointless at this point, I think, or meaningless. You don't actually achieve a degree of in the humanities or in the arts when you go to university. But because the degree would be, in an Aristotelian sense, should be eth- part of ethical action. It's an end in itself, but it isn't. It's a product, and you are also a product as a student at a university, by the way. So uh, you know, the degree is what is produced as a signal for the cybernetic global. It's not really a labor market. Is anyone still laboring? Few people are still, yes, but for the knowledge economy, to signal to it that you are employable and that you've gone through the brainwash machinery that has produced you as a uh, young adult that is capable of critical thinking skills, as if thinking were a skill. It's not a skill. Reason is not a skill. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about where the university is, that this is how they um, market their own uh, degrees, so called, which aren't degrees, but really are products. Um, and you become part of the product as well. So the question is, uh, ultimately, in reading this text, will be one: how ethical life is genuinely possible. And there's no more important question. Uh, when you think of contemporary discussions on ethics, AI ethics, or the ethics of self-driving cars, these are all purely, and first of all, there cannot be an AI ethics because AI is not human. So there's nothing that's doing the acting. Yeah, that's already a categorical mistake. There can be an ethics, perhaps, how we interact with it amongst each other, amongst human beings, but nothing else. And so complete confusion, of course, we live in the time of confusion, but also if those so-called AI ethics or the ethics of self-driving cars and blah, blah, it's pure utilitarianism. It's only ever, oh, should the self-driving car kill the baby or the grandmother? And then we look at utility calculations, and those will be what decide the algorithm by which the car gets to kill what the car gets to kill. That even just the question is insane. It doesn't strike any of the people involved in these endless debates uh, as in any way thought worthy, or should give us pause. Should make us think that we've fallen that far. But well, so the course is an invitation to think through what it means to lead an ethical life. An ethical life doesn't mean that I want to be good, but to live together well in a polity. What does Nietzsche say? Beware the ones who want to be good. They need the lie the most. So we're not talking about moral goodness, hyper morality as we know it today. That's not the issue. We're talking about genuine virtue and virtuous life, which is well beyond current discussions of so called morality, which is a hijacked morality, anyways. So, let me just show you perhaps again what it looks like on the inside. So you can see if you sign up. This is one of the lectures here. This is on the Agora. This is actually in the this is at Aristotle's Lyceum. This is the lecture on Scolaire on book 10. So there's the video, there's always the audio as well. And as I said before, there will be, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to upload so with every week, I'm uploading the PDF of the lecture notes, so you can download the lecture notes and also, read along and think along. There will be selected readings for every week. So I'm using in English the Loeb translation. It has the Greek text. It's a good translation. I've also used a standard German translation in the Reklam Verlag. And I have sometimes tried to translate Aristotle a bit myself as well, but we should I do follow the Loeb translation for the most part. Where I move away from it, I will make you aware. If it's not my if it is my translation, I think it's in the lecture notes, so that you know where the quotes do come from. Yeah, so I do hope really that you can join us. That if I don't know you yet, that I get to meet you in 2 weeks. And if I know you already, that I get to see you again and that we get to spend time together. This is the best way to end this year. I would say. I don't know what else you've got planned in the dark months ahead, but what could be better than thinking through ways of leading the good life, leading the life that is ethical in this sense, as we discussed, and hence also with a focus to enacting what it means to be human, specifically human. And yeah, that is what I hope. Well, what I genuinely hope to be able to get across is that texts such as this are not information. They ask you, they require you to think them through. And as you're thinking them through, that is how and when you actually enact logos. Yeah, logos is not an abstraction, it's not just the word that comes, etc. Logos is lived reason, and your character is formed every day in every of your actions and decisions, etc. Yeah. Even the more intelligent neurologists, who of course have the the major manco that they only ever focus on the brain. But the more intelligent neurologists will also agree, or have to point out, that the brain changes every day with every impression, every decision, every experience, all the time. It's not static. There's an activity in the brain, but there's an activity that it means to be human. Being itself is active. It's not to be conflated with notions of pure being, substantive pure being, etc., that are metaphysical. So, okay. Seeing that there are no more questions, if you do have a question, I can wait a couple more minutes just so that you can get your question in. If there aren't any, however, then it is time for me to retire, I'm afraid. It is late and dark. But I can give it a couple more questions. I can give it a couple more minutes, sorry, if there are any more questions. But it seems not. So let me just summarize again that in 2 weeks exactly, because now, of course, in the end, most people show up in the end. We now have about 26 people listening. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Witt. Good evening, great work. Good evening to you, sir. And thank you very much indeed. So yes, I hope that this presentation here, it was a bit it was not as detailed, of course, as the lectures will be, but it should be also a standalone lecture for anyone who wants to know more about eudaimonia in Aristotle. So if you're listening to this, just now, if you're just dropping in now, do listen back and you learn a bit on what Aristotle means by eudaimonia and the good life, and also how it relates really to Heidegger and authenticity. Those of you who took my Heidegger course um, in 2022 will remember that we discussed quite often and at length how authenticity is not a state that Dasein can reach. But for some reason, there's a tendency that people want that. They want uh, they want it to be a state, and there are, you know, uh, there are enough. Um, There are enough scholars and academics who understand it in this way. So let me just go over. There's a question by Chimbo. I'll get to this in a second, but let me just point out now that the link to enroll is, where is it? So I'll put the link in the chat if that's okay. This is the link to enroll. You can maybe, if you can, follow that link. It takes you to this website so we can look at it together. It's teachable, and they provide you with different payment providers. I think you can use Google Pay, PayPal, and of course credit and debit cards. The currency is US dollars, which is the international currency still. Now here are all the seminar dates. They're listed here. We meet 10 times. The final seminar is for you to present your own work at the symposium. We meet from 6 to 8 p.m. UK time. That's 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you Americans know exactly where you live, so you can orientate yourself and find out. Oh yeah, please note, I should have mentioned this maybe earlier. Sorry. Please note that at some point during the course of this, Europe and the US will move to winter time. So there will be some discrepancy at some point, because I think Europe moves to winter time earlier. So May, for some time, I think we may, Eastern, you'll start at 12 p.m. or the other, or maybe 2 p.m. I can never remember that one, but there will be a couple of weeks where this will be off, but then we go back again to 1 to 3 p.m. for all of you in America, depending which time zone you're in. Anyways, if you would like to learn this at your own pace and you cannot make at least 5 of the seminars, which I think would be good that you can make at least 5, then the self-study tier is the best for you. This gives you access to more than 8, I should say, more than 8 lecture files, lecture series, etc. Because, well, there are now 8 that have been uploaded. Those are the ones that I recorded last year in Athens, but there will be additional lectures that I will write during the live seminars. So the live seminars will usually begin with a brief, or sometimes maybe even a bit longer, lecture by me. So I will present that's too cheap. Ewiger Schüler. So the eternal pupil points out that it's too cheap. Well, thank you very much. I hope that you then join us at this apparently very cheap price. We try to be reasonable, balanced, and in such a way that I can live and don't have to worry too much, but also money is just a means, it's not an end, as Aristotle would say. So the reason for doing this is not money. The reason for doing this is ethical, ultimately. $650. Yes, that's the price for the philosophical fellowship. So that's 10 weeks of seminars. I'd like to invite you all. If you can make at least 5, please do come to the seminars. So you click on here, that's what you do, and then you click on enroll now, and you're in. That's the British spelling, by the way, for those of you in America who want to complain. Where's the second L? 5 private tutorials with Johannes if you'd like to have private meetings with me, private tutorials, and this is ideal for you. This means that we meet, in addition to the seminars, we meet 5 times over Zoom, privately, off the record. And if you have pressing questions on Aristotle, or perhaps more broadly on ethics, Greek philosophy, then this is for you. But the focus must be on Aristotle here. I can also help you to some degree with perhaps if you're working towards a longer essay or a piece that you're writing for perhaps your own blog or YouTube channel or anything, any creative project, and that I can be of help too. But it should be on Aristotle, yes. And if you'd like to just perhaps pay in 3 installments, then just click on 3 payments of 120. That's the payment plan for the seminars. Now, as Mr. Eternal Student pointed out, it's too cheap. So perhaps it is now time to enroll and keep the lights on here for me. Now, there was a question from Seraphim, and this is one I can answer very quickly. So let me just turn off the share screen. Seraphim asks, you happen to know which lib classic the number? So it's, I think the one you're looking for, there are 2 different ones. It's in Aristotle, so it's just the Aristotle is 19. I don't know why it doesn't do this. Okay. And down here, 73. Yeah. Plenty of websites out there that might have the PDF of that work as well. So in Aristotle, it's 19, and I think in the overall series is 73. So this was Seraphim's question. Then we have one here by Mr. Jimbo. In a word, can you explain Aristotle's golden mean? Well, not so much in a word, but if you're asking just for a brief introduction to it, you've heard, of course, the notion of the golden mean. That's inspired by this as well. It has to do very much, danke bitte, Herr Winslow. It has to do, of course, with the Delphic maxim meden agan, nothing in excess, nothing in exuberance, perhaps of nothing too much. And to try and find the mean has to do also with phronesis and proiresis. So it is in making a choice, in acting, in etching one's character, in action, etc. Um, but it isn't to do with. It's not a number. It can't be quantified. Very important. It it eludes quantification. So you cannot turn this into a utilitarian calculation for what is the perfect golden mean for the greatest amount of people. Uh, and Aristotle, for example, gives the example of health. Um, Let me just find a quote here. So let's say here in affectation there is excess and lack, but also there's always a center, and that center that can shift. There's a moment when being too courageous. Let's say you have a mean of being courageous, but there can be a situation in which to be that courageous is actually to a detriment, because it might be um, reckless in that moment, so you might have to adjust. And so it's also not just it's not automatic, yeah. uh, and also you might be, or you find yourself in a situation where your mean or courage isn't enough, so you become a coward if you don't step up. So there's always a rebalancing, as it were. um, and it is arete, usually translated as virtue, that aims at the center, the symmetria, the symmetry. Mesotes is another Greek word for this. And so arete, or virtue, very much has to do with the mean. And we'll discuss, hence, the course, and also, that's also in the lectures that have already been recorded, how to think of arete differently, so that it doesn't just mean virtue. I don't think that virtue captures what Aristotle is after, but we see here already also, I think, the crucial relationship between arete and scolaire. So, great question, Jim, on what the mean is. I would say rather the mean rather than the golden mean, but that's not that important ultimately. I hope that you can join us, Jim, and anyone else who's listening as well. If you know anyone interested in philosophy, in Aristotle, Greek philosophy more broadly, in ethics, and ethical questions of our time and the ethical life, please do let them know. Send them the link to this and to this stream, and maybe also to the course, so that we all may join in dialogue in a few weeks' time. Again, thank you very much for your great questions. Thank you, Mr. Witt. Thank you, Mr. Winslow. Thank you, Mr. Chimbo. Thank you, Mrs. Dorfmeyer, Mr. Chokin, and Indiana as well, for your questions and your remarks. Uh, well, I think that should be it for now. I shall retire. Good night.